NASCAR is falling apart, and the latest move by ESPN is only going to enhance this even further. On top of the team owners being absolutely angry with how NASCAR is being led, the lowered interest has forced ESPN to a move that NASCAR would have never expected, and now the entire sport is under a huge threat. Will this be the final nail in the coffin for the France family, and will NASCAR survive with its team owners forming their own alliance? After the failed business model has been the most recent talking point of NASCAR's own demise, it seems like there is another specter that many fans weren't able to fully grasp, and it's now due for a renewal: the media TV rights. And from what we can see, the interest in ESPN has cooled massively, mostly due to the increased popularity of the NBA, one of the vital branches of the service media. This move affects NASCAR massively, and to make things even worse, this is not the only bad news that would see the sport head into its own downfall. Before we go into ESPN's actions, let's talk about one of the most legendary tracks on the calendar, Bristol Motor Speedway, and the chances of this legendary race not hosting two NASCAR Cup Series from 2024 onward. Yes, this does sound a bit shocking when you hear it as it is, but rest assured that we are shocked like you as well. In the broken business model, NASCAR's tracks receive around 65% of the annual budget, but they are also majorly owned by the sport itself, meaning that apart from those 15% that the France family gets for themselves, a huge profit goes to their bank account from the track that the sport owns. Bristol, however, is not one of those tracks, and now due to the lowered interest in the sport, which simultaneously connects with ESPN's cooled down interest in renewing the contract with NASCAR, the sport is in the worst negotiating position possible. You have a track that wants to separate the events, and the second one would be replaced by one at the North Wilkesboro Speedway instead. So if you are the France family and you want to use something as leverage in the negotiations with ESPN, this would definitely be the opposite of that. And it's not just any track we're talking about. This is the last great Coliseum, which is the concrete outlet that once made fans be a part of a waitlist that lasted for years. In 1983, the track itself hosted just 25,000 fans, but 20 years later, it was completely sold out for a full arena of 160,000 die-hard NASCAR fans. Now, this might all go down in history, but with this, NASCAR's interest has taken yet another massive hit. Furthermore, Bristol isn't just any kind of event. It's the one that NASCAR turned into an experimental dirt event back in 2021, something that got a huge revolt out of the fans. 2 years later, and you have the race itself wanting to commit this controversial move? But it was only fair for them to come to this approach, mostly because the Thunder Valley electrocuted itself with the fact that neither the Gen 6 nor the next-gen chassis were built to withstand the pounding on the concrete surface. As I mentioned earlier in this video, this is strongly correlated with the lowered interest by ESPN, and now it seems like there will be an increased interest from other streaming platforms such as Amazon. You'd think that ESPN is the one losing in this situation, right? After all, NASCAR found a perfect fit straight out of the gate in Amazon. But you're missing one thing. Amazon is a platform to which you have to subscribe in order to watch the events. This means that the auditorium would have to pay to watch a sport that already has a very low amount of interest from the fans due to the bad policies and all the drama that goes between the team owners and the France family. So who really is on the losing side? When talking about the TV rights, Jordan Bianchi, who is a staff writer that covers motorsports for The Atlantic, reveals that Fox and NBC are expected to retain the TV rights to NASCAR. But ESPN's hit will have far bigger consequences for the sport than anyone would originally anticipate. He added, "One reason why is that ESPN's deal with the NBA is coming up for renewal, a package one would assume is a priority to retain, and it must negotiate such an extension amid company-wide belt tightening. This doesn't leave a lot left over to pursue deals with other sports leagues like NASCAR." According to recent reports, NASCAR has already explored the possibility of showcasing a package of summer races exclusively on a streaming service. And yet again, the streaming service that leads everybody else in this race is Amazon, as they are more than willing to add a large number of subscribers to their platform in order to broadcast the races from what used to be one of the most exciting motorsports championships in America. Nonetheless, this will have a negative impact on the fans, as not every one of them wants to pay extra just to watch the show, when prior to this, it was more or less free. Apart from the fans, sponsorships are yet another sector that will be massively hurt by ESPN's cooled interest, as they usually seek wider exposure for the least amount of money possible. With a deal like this, though, their reach to the audience will be limited, and that could only mean one thing: less sponsors being involved in the sport. This connects us back to the business model, one that the France family isn't ready to talk about a potential renewal of, as sponsors are the ones bringing 60 to 80% of the money to the teams. If you add this burden to them, then it's safe to say that many of the already existing sponsors will depart on their own, similar to what happened between Bush and M&M. But even with the situation standing like this, there is a possibility that this could turn out well for the entire NASCAR ecosystem. Because if a platform like Amazon is ready to invest in the sport with a similar amount of money as NBC and Fox are currently doing, it might be a great opportunity to offset any potential loss of sponsorship revenue. Now, while the Amazon dice would be a 50-50 gamble for NASCAR's popularity, one that they might be forced to take with ESPN's backing down from the sport, the Bristol situation is something that points towards the more negative consequences of the sport and what actually happens when people who haven't raced are leading the entire community. While you might think that the Bristol issue is one to be fixed easily, leaving it alone, switching it to 2 exciting short races on concrete just like in the good old days, this is where the trick lies. We are not in the good old days anymore. The reality of 2023 is that NASCAR is not that sustainable on these short track races, such as Atlanta or Dover Motor Speedway. And with the new chassis and new car regulations, the future looks vastly different for the sport from this point of view. If you compare the statistics, the 2022 season produced some of the worst competition that the sport was able to witness, especially at Martinsville Speedway, where we witnessed only 5 lead changes, seemingly a handful more passes throughout the entire field, and just 1 spin on a track that is known for providing a fender-to-fender combat. Had this happened to NASCAR in the past, when the leadership from the Fantz family was a bit more generous and thoughtful for the future of the sport, alarm bells would have been ringing from day one. Changes to the car would have been applied immediately, and the team owners would have had a bigger say in this entire situation. But the sole fact that everything is being sabotaged in terms of the negotiations taking place for issues that are making the team owners think towards a potential split is definitely spelling bad news for the NASCAR future. To add salt to the wound, ESPN agreed to cover all 6 of SRX's events in 2023. And the fact that Tony Stewart is just rubbing this off the faces of NASCAR leaders has the potential to become something much bigger than what it is right now. If there is something that we've learned in the 2023 seasons as of now, it's that the owners of the tracks and the team owners are not willing to be the sport's financial punching bag. And this is one of the reasons why Bristol has opted to join forces with the rebellion of the RTA and has received wind in its back from ESPN's potential backing off the sport. The answer is in NASCAR's hands, more precisely among the France family circles. All they have to do is increase revenue from the next television deal and make the current charter system permanent. This seems like a lot to be asked from the ownership, and when talking about this in particular, the only solution NASCAR offered was in terms of teams cutting costs and shredding even more of the already thin profits that are coming into their bank accounts. The future is not bright for NASCAR, and things haven't stood as bad as they are right now, with ESPN's lost interest only being an indicator that if something doesn't drastically change in the leadership, then the sport is headed into its own demise.